When we think about football ineptitude, we usually think of the Lions, who have never won a Super Bowl, or the Browns, who have had 2 winning seasons in the last 17 with back-to-back years of 1-15 and 0-16 mixed in. And yeah, the Jets and the Raiders are pretty bad too. But what about a team that doesn't get quite the credit it deserves for their recent incompetence? The Washington Commanders. It's bad enough that they haven't won a playoff game since 1992, but we need to take a deeper dive into the list of quarterbacks this team has trotted onto the field since 2000. Brad Johnson started the year as Washington's QB in 2000 and went 7-4. Not bad, right? And isn't this the guy that would go on to win a Super Bowl in Tampa the next season? Yes, that's the guy. The Bucs defense scored 21 of their 48 points in the title game, by the way. But in Washington, he threw 15 interceptions and just 11 touchdowns with an absolutely putrid 75.7 quarterback rating. He was also injured that year, and the fill-in was Jeff George, a 33-year-old has-been that never was, who was once touted as having the greatest arm talent of all time. He won just 1 of 4 games in the 2000 season. George started the first 2 games of 2001, losing both, and would be out of the league by the end of the year. 6th-year vet Tony Banks followed Jeff George in 2001. Washington missed the playoffs, and Banks was soon off to Houston for 3 more years as a backup. This is where things start to get interesting. Marty Schottenheimer is let go, and Steve Spurrier enters and has his fun-and-gun offense in 2000. The old ball coach, of course, started a Florida Gator at QB in Game 1, Shane Matthews, and it worked. For 1 game. Matthews posted 320 yards in a win against the Cardinals in Week 1. They would subsequently get blasted over the next 2 games, and the fun and gun was already gone. Patrick Ramsey would be the next victim of the Spurrier experiment. He would throw 4 interceptions against the Saints that year and stick around long enough to go 10-14 for Washington over his 4 seasons with the team. Another former Gator, Danny Werfel, was awful in his 4 games with the team in 2001, tossing 3 touchdowns and 6 interceptions in 4 games as a starter. He was also out of the league at the end of the season. In 2003, former Boston College legend Tim Hasselbeck started 5 games, and we'd find out that his only real claim to fame was marrying Elizabeth from the TV show Survivor. Hasselbeck went 1-4 as a starter and tossed more interceptions than touchdowns. He'd never start in the league again. They brought back legendary coach Joe Gibbs, who had been more concerned with his NASCAR team since his retirement. Patrick Ramsey started half the games, and another aging QB was brought back in Mark Brunell. Brunell would start 33 games over the next 3 years in Washington, winning just 15. The team did win 10 games in 2005, but lost to the Seahawks in the divisional round. Rookie Jason Campbell would take the reins for most of the next 4 years with the team, keeping them mostly mediocre. His best year was 2008 when the team was 8-8 and he had 13 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. He finished 20-32 as a starter and bounced around to Oakland, Cleveland, Chicago, and Cincinnati, starting 27 more games in his career, but never really finding much success. While Campbell was there, veteran Todd Collins spent some time under center, going 3-0, but Collins spent almost the entirety of his 11-year career as a backup. In 2010, Washington couldn't escape the idea of grabbing a veteran coach with perhaps his best days behind him and also adding a washed QB into the mix. Mike Shanahan was hired, and the team also brought in a 34-year-old Donovan McNabb, who led the team to a 5-8 record while accumulating more interceptions than touchdowns. McNabb spent 1 more season in Minnesota, where he went just 1-5 as a starter. Another veteran, Rex Grossman, went 1-2 for the team that year, and Washington tried to revive his career in 2011, and it went about as well as you might have expected. Grossman threw 20 interceptions, which was his career calling card, and the team went 5-11. Grossman would also be out of the league after the season. When the 2012 draft rolled around, it was clear the franchise needed to try something different. With the Colts locked into the number 1 pick and the generational talent of Andrew Luck, Washington would trade up to the number 2 spot to land Robert Griffin III. RG3 had just won the Heisman and captivated fans in his first season, running away with the Offensive Rookie of the Year trophy and leading the team to the playoffs with a 10-6 record. He threw for 3,200 yards and ran for more than 800 while tossing 20 touchdowns to just 5 picks. RG3 would tweak his knee late in the year, Griffin would suffer a serious knee injury in their wildcard loss to Seattle and would have surgery on his ACL and MCL days later. Sadly, RG3 was never the same, and in fact suffered another serious injury in 2014. He would go 5-15 over the next 2 seasons for Washington and finished off a once promising career as a backup in Cleveland and Baltimore, retiring in 2020. Washington strangely also drafted Kirk Cousins in the 4th round of the 2012 draft, but in what appeared to be a bit of an odd move at the time, turned out to be a positive one for the team, who was able to insert Cousins during RG3's injury struggles. Cousins showed promise in 2015, leading the team to a first-place finish in the NFC East in 2015 and leading the league in completion percentage. They lost to the Packers in a wild-card matchup, but Cousins played well. Perhaps Cousins' most memorable moment in Washington occurred after finishing the largest comeback in team history and upon heading to the locker room, shouted this at the cameras. Cousins would finish 2016 and 2017 as the starter, going 8-7-1 and 9-7, but missing the playoffs in both years. The team traded for Alex Smith to be the starter. Unfortunately, Smith suffered a gruesome injury in the 11th game of the season that would keep him out for over a year and a half. At 6-4, the team was still in the hunt for a playoff spot. Colt McCoy would enter for Smith and lose the next 2 games before giving way to Mark Sanchez, who lost his lone start and would subsequently retire that year. Journeyman Josh Johnson then led the team for 3 games and won just once, finishing out a 7-9 season before heading to the AFL and XFL, then eventually making it back to the league as a backup. With Alex Smith out for the 2019 season, Washington needed a new starter once again. This time, they turned to yet another veteran journeyman, Case Keenum, who actually put together a strong season 2 years prior in Minnesota. Things wouldn't work out for Keenum in Washington, however, as he put together a 1-7 record as starter with just 11 touchdowns. Meanwhile, in his one start that year, Colt McCoy returned and also lost. Washington finished the year with a 3-13 record. It was another roller coaster in 2020. Dwayne Haskins began the year under center, but wasn't able to put together many wins, finishing the year 1-5. Haskins would tragically die in 2022 while a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Alex Smith was able to return, however, and injected some positive vibes into the squad, who were able to reach the playoffs despite a 7-9 record. Unfortunately for Smith, his comeback couldn't be fully realized as a bone bruise kept him out of the playoff game, and Washington called on undrafted Taylor Heinicke to try and pick up the win. Heinicke played inspired football against the Bucs and Tom Brady, but ultimately failed 31-23. Heinicke apparently earned the trust of the team and head coach Ron Rivera after just the one playoff loss and was named the starter for the 2021 season. He was solid but not spectacular, finishing the year 7-8 as the starter, adding 20 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, and 3,400 yards. Washington sprinkled in Garrett Gilbert, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Kyle Allen in the other games, but failed to recreate another playoff appearance. A game of veteran QB roulette hit the team in 2022 again, as this time Carson Wentz took over the starting job. Wentz was never able to get back to anywhere near his MVP form as a rookie and won only 2 games and threw for just over 1,700 yards in 7 games as the team turned back to Heinicke. Heinicke's record was better at 5-3-1, but once the team was out of playoff contention, they switched over to rookie Sam Howell, who was hoping to be the future of the team. He threw for 169 yards in a Week 18 win over Dallas, who was resting most of their starters. Howell started the 2023 season with the team having high hopes for the gunslinger, and Howell definitely slung it around, leading the league in attempts, but unfortunately also leading the league in interceptions with 21. What's worse is that Washington turned in another 13-loss season, after which Ron Rivera was shown the door, as was Howell, who landed in Seattle. Good news was on the way for the franchise, however, because Dan Snyder sold the team that year, and there was some hope of a turnaround. And the team found it in the 2024 draft with the number 3 overall pick. Jayden Daniels has arguably been the top offensive rookie in 2024 and has led the team to an 8-5 record and a potential spot in the playoffs. Daniels has nearly a 70% completion rating with 15 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. He's also rushed for nearly 600 yards and 6 touchdowns on the ground. It's been a wild ride for the Commanders, especially for wide receiver Terry McLaurin, who has been with the team for 5 years and in this season is catching passes from his 12th quarterback. Hopefully for McLaurin and Washington fans, this one will last at least a bit longer.